As y'all have heard me say before, the most important part of planning any adventure are the snacks. And if you're looking for a delicious and nutritious snack that packs a real protein punch, crack into a good source of protein with tasty, healthy, wonderful pistachios. Each 1 ounce serving of wonderful pistachios contains 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value in that one serving. It's one of the highest protein nuts out there. And that's not all. Pistachios are also known for the fiber and better for you unsaturated fats, which may help keep you feeling fuller longer. Best part, wonderful pistachios come in a variety of flavors and sizes. Perfect for enjoying with your family and friends or taking them with you on your summer adventures for those snacks we're talking about. So whether you're dropping off the kiddos or running between meetings or about to climb a mountain, fuel up with a healthy and tasty snack. Wonderful Pistachios will be your new go-to. You can check them out at wonderfulpistachios.com and learn more about how these little green wonders can power up your day. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason. Today we are doing something a little unique. We're hearing from McKee, who was on the show Naked and Afraid. The show is out right now. It came out kind of around the middle of last month, the most recent season of Naked and Afraid. And, you know, if you're at all in touch with television or reality TV, you've probably heard of that show over the years. They're in like their 20th season or something. It's a wild concept. It's people literally being naked, thrown out into the wilderness, having to survive on teams, and they can bring like 1 or 2 items, and the show just captures their experience. And so Naeem has been on twice, and we're going to hear about this most recent trip, what it was like, some of the misconceptions, how much of an adventure it really is, a little behind the scenes. So this most recent episode, 9 challengers were abandoned in a remote tropical island with no maps or tools, miles away from civilization. They were in teams of 3, and they swam to different ecosystems on the same island, sun-scorched beaches, twisting, difficult mangrove swamps to navigate through, dense jungle, and they had to all basically go on their own survival journey. They got to use orientation and navigation skills, survive off debris and wreckage that they come across. No knives, no pots, no fire starters, no anything. They got to scavenge for things and find their own food. It's something a lot of us might daydream about surviving and maybe doing ourselves, you know, to get dropped off on an island. I've actually know plenty of people that do that yearly as like their, you know, retreat. I've never done it. I've obviously, you know, when you're out there camping and backpacking and whatnot, you got to a certain degree, survive, but usually can bring a lot with you. I've never just been dropped off somewhere and said, hey, survive. I'm sure that is an amazingly profound and unique experience. Well, Naeem is awesome to talk to. This was a great conversation. And if you'd like, you can check out this season of Naked and Afraid, Castaways, on Sundays at 8 p.m. on the Discovery Channel. All right, let's go ahead and dive in. Hey, folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today, very unique adventure. I don't think we've ever had anybody from Naked and Afraid on the show. Maybe people that have been on since talking to them, but never like to talk about this. And I'm actually really excited because I know a lot of people that watch the show, and you always wonder, like, what is it really like? What's really going on that you know people don't see on camera? So Naeem McKee, I actually didn't get your last name pronunciation, but I think that's right. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, what's up, man? You got it right. Naeem McKee, I'm in the house. Yep. 2-time alum of the television show Naked and Afraid, lifelong adventurer, father, joyous ex-husband, current boyfriend, and all around super amazing individual.
Man, I you got to give your own intro because I couldn't have done it that well. I couldn't have done it justice, man. That is awesome. Where are you coming from today? That's always my first question. And if that isn't home, because, you know, for an adventurer, you could be anywhere, you know, where's home for you?
Well, today the roots are firmly planted. I am in Colorado. I am in Centennial, which is just south of Denver. That's where I call home. I'm originally from the great city of Cincinnati, Ohio.
I've been to Cincinnati. I like Cincinnati a lot. I feel like Ohio.
I tell you, I feel sorry for you. It's great for me. It's the place that made me who I am. But yeah, it's a good town, man. It's gotten much better over the years.
Oh, yeah. I actually was looking you up a little bit. I saw that you went to school and actually served as a professor at Metro State. That's where my wife went to college for a little while. We lived there for quite a few years, moved to Florida recently. But I was like, no way, Metro State, University of Denver, and you live out there. That's awesome. So are you like, what do you like to do in Colorado? Are you like a skier? Do you get out in the mountains? What's kind of like your adventures of choice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, this is such a wonderful state to live in. Everything is here. And so I try and do everything that I can. I'm a snowboarder, so I love getting up into the mountains to snowboard during the winter. During the off season, I do triathlons. I love to swim. I especially love the outdoor swimming. I do a cold water immersion group every Saturday morning up in Boulder and jump into Boulder Creek. And that's a year-round gig. I do that. Done whitewater rafting. Love the bicycle. Cycling. I love cycling. Lots of great trails to cycle. I run pretty avidly. I backpack and camp. My girlfriend has done every 14er in the state. She's putting together an app on the Colorado Trail and mapping out every great campsite, every place where there's water, everywhere you could find a fire. So I've been sort of scrambling with her on the weekends, and then just lifelong hustle, own my own business in addition to working a full-time gig. And just, for me, I try not to be bored. And so Colorado offers, there's really no excuse to stay indoors.
Dang, I should have asked you what do you not do? Because that would have been a shorter list. Man, you do it all. This podcast was born in the Front Range, really. Recently took it to the East Coast, but like the roots, a lot of our stories still, feature the 14ers, feature Colorado. And, that's kind of where the heart of this show was born. So, man, that's awesome. You're doing literally everything. And triathlons, too. I was just at the Lake Placid Ironman like last week with my family. That was their first one ever. We didn't do it. We were there with Athletic Bruin. It was amazing. It was just an awesome setting. Like that was such a huge triathlon, such a long one, a full Ironman. That was epic. It makes you want to do one. I've done a few, but not recently. But that's awesome, man. What a cool. I love talking to folks that are taking advantage of where they are, because not every guest on the show lives in a place like Colorado, but you don't have to just enjoy where you are. But I'm so glad to hear you're just going after it out there. Beautiful place. So, well, tell us about, and Sophie, you can jump in. I'm not sure how much you can share. I'm sure but like I do want to just ask kind of like behind the scenes a little bit, but we'll start with like your first experience with Naked and Afraid. How'd you get looped into this? What was that process like? Was it like, hey, application's open, I'm going to throw my name in the hat, and then it just kind of spiraled out of control from there? Or like, what was the process? Where did it enter your mind?
So it's really the process of getting on Naked and Afraid it's two stories in one. It's sort of the process of finding the show, doing the application, getting selected. And then there was the mental process of like coming to a point where this was something I wanted to do in my life. And so it's sort of hard to tell that story without telling both parts. To make a story short, I was a VP of marketing at a company called Above Board out in New York. I was working remotely in Colorado. And, my whole life has been really just this relentless pursuit of excellence, as trying to get as far as I could, dynamically in my career, always pushing myself. And, I got to this point where I land this VP job, and I'm sort of thinking like, man, no, the dog days are behind you, like you've made it. And instead, what I found was all those emotions that I thought, would resolve themselves on the way up the ladder, just were still there, like self-doubt, lack of confidence, just feeling just this insane feeling of being uncomfortable, questioning your value and whether or not this was the right decision for you. And I'll never forget, we were on a meeting at work and we were talking about reality shows. And one of the guys I work with was like a finalist for The Bachelorette. And they asked, what show would you do? And I said, I'd do Naked and Afraid if I could. And everyone was like, oh, you'd be perfect. Go do it. Yeah. And it was like just that right point of like, yeah, I'm really, there's something not right now. And I've always wanted to do this. And I got like 12 people egging me on. So I went out to the internet and just Googled, like, how do I get on Naked and Afraid? I found a website, filled out like a web form, like name, email, why you want to do the show. And sure enough, like they called me a couple weeks later, and I just, as it got more serious, that like all the steps got more serious, I just realized it was something I had to do. And the great thing was my job above board was fantastic about giving me the space to do that, understanding sort of where I was in my journey, and giving me sort of the, like, which is rarely happens in companies, giving me an opportunity to go and explore and find a way to sort of, right my ship or turn my, what is the motivational speaker says, turn your sails in a new direction. Same river, point your sails in a new direction. So that's what I did. And, that's how I got on the show. And I've always been outdoorsy, and I've got a past, obviously, I've got some experience with survival, but, to put all those things together into that one choice, it really came down to those two things.
When it started getting real, and especially the first time where you didn't have any experience with the show, and you're about to be naked for, weeks at a time on some remote location, when it started to get real, what were the people around you thinking when you broke the news to them? Was it like, either your kids like, Dad, you lost your mind, or, buddy, you're going crazy. Like, this is not how you deal with getting stuck in life. Like, what are you doing? What were the people around you saying?
My ex-wife at the time was super supportive, actually. She's real supportive. We were fans of the show. And she knew I was always saying, I can do this. And she was always saying, well, you should do it. You should do it. So it really wasn't a huge surprise. I think she might have asked once or twice, like, are you sure that you really want to do this? My kids were not excited about it, but I think it was just more that Dad was they're older. They're like 16 and 13 and totally like, we got good stuff going for us, Dad. Don't you ruin it, by being naked on television. So it's more that kind of vibe. Now, my siblings and my family, it's like they all know me. In fact, from the moment I told my youngest sister, there's a chance I could be on the show, she's like, oh, you're going to be on the show. There's no doubt in my mind, knowing there's zero chance you're not going to do it. So everyone was real supportive. I think my friends didn't quite understand it. Because to them, they're like, why? Like, most people work their lives to find comfort, like, why would you want to go do something like this? I realized sort of as I've gotten older, I realized that, like, not everyone around you is going to understand the choices you make in life. Not everyone is going to understand why you do the things you do, why certain things are necessary to you. And there were some people that were sort of naysayers, that took a shot at me. It didn't matter to me. I knew what I needed and I knew what I wanted to do. And I've never regretted that decision. It was very easy. And for most of the people around me that knew me well, they were very, very supportive.
The show, Naked and Afraid. Naked is a given. You're going to have to be naked. But afraid, I mean, that's maybe a choice. There's a lot more choice in that part of it. How did you feel getting ready for this? Was it, holy, what am I about to do? Or were you excited? Like, what was the feeling going in, and what were you maybe nervous about as it got closer?
People that watch a show like Naked and Afraid, sometimes what you don't get is like just how exposed you really are in the environment that you're in. And so in the run up to it, they're constantly explaining to you, what you're going to face. You're going to face starvation. You could face lack of water. You could face illnesses that, are life-altering illnesses. Exposure to wildlife that, is some of the most dangerous wildlife on the planet. There is, safety is a nominal notion when you participate in the challenge like Naked and Afraid. And I think the first time I did it, I think it was actually, I was way more naive about like all those things, like the degree to which you could potentially, have life-altering changes. But as soon as you get out into the open, as soon as you realize it, you realize just how exposed you are. You're trampling through the brush and some of the most dense vegetation, on the planet. There are pit vipers, there's the fertilance that's out there, there's scorpions, there's all kinds of stinging insects, there's jaguars. I was exposed to temperature swings anywhere from, 80 degrees during the daytime to 30 degrees at night, in which case you're naked. I mean, there is a real risk of hypothermia. There's a real risk of falling asleep and not waking up. You're drinking from local water supplies. You're on the first adventure, boiling our water, but that's not to say that, you won't have an immune response to something in the environment and come home with something that could be life altering. And so, I think the big thing in terms of that fear is a healthy component. And going up to it, I didn't know what to expect. I was just super excited to just be going on some adventure. And, I was all full of piss and vinegar to get out there and take on the elements. Completely naive about the mental challenge that would come with that type of exposure, and then the very real physical consequences that come with it as well.
Do you do anything to prepare, or did they kind of want you to not be prepared?
I went to a nude yoga class because I had a lot of body image issues, man. I was like, I'm not sure I'm ready to be.
I would be mortified if I had to be naked, not only in front of just people, but with cameras following me, man. I could not. I don't think I could do it.
So I went to this nude yoga class, and it was all guys that were participating. The teacher was female, older lady, but it was really great for getting past that, sort of getting past those body image issues and sort of worrying about your form. Like, it was fantastic. And so I did that. That really helped with the nudity portion. On the run up, I went through I just went through and did all my trapping skills. There's a survival instructor down in Colorado Springs. I went and hung out with him, and we talked about what would be unique about a primitive survival challenge, where you're potentially exposed. And he was like, it was a lot of, finding 5 or 6 solutions for one thing versus, okay, I'll build a shelter and I'm building it using paracord and tools that I may not have when I'm out in the bush. The other thing was, on the weekends, I went up to St. Mary's Glacier, would hike up to the top, sleep out in the cold, sleep out in the elements.
Wow.
Just bring less and less tools to restrict myself till I was, really just there with a knife and a very basic implement to boil water. And so, I prepared that way. And yeah, and just read. I've read a ton about Argentina. I read a lot about, bushcraft and whatever I could get my hands on that just give me that sort of mental confidence that I had all my skills in place and that I could dial those things up and use them as needed.
What were some of the things that you wish you would have prepared more for that you didn't think would be a problem? Because looking at any adventure, any challenge in life, you have a feeling of what you think you need to know. I mean, parenthood, same way. I got to get ready. Then there's these things that you just never could have even thought about until you get into it. Was there anything like that you had just a realization wow, I had no idea this would be part of it?
So many things. So many things.
It's like a book, I'm sure.
So many things.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. I'm not the most fashionable guy out there, but I do know good style when I see it. And I do take pride in looking nice at work and out on adventures. I want to look the part, but I don't want to be thinking about the gear all the time. And that's why I love Roark. They've done the hard work for me. It's bold, bright, beautiful gear and clothing that's adventure ready, but also work ready and office ready and kind of daily life ready. It's high quality, long lasting gear that will quickly become a regular part of your adventure kit. And what's cool about all Roark's gear is it has a story behind it. They make the journey a part of the story of the product. The team at Roark does a lot of traveling and adventures themselves, and they are inspired by what they see and what they do to make the quality clothing and gear that they sell. So whether that's remote island chains, the streets of Jakarta, kayaking sea trails in Maine, or anything in between, Roark has developed the perfect options for those experiences. In fact, I'm wearing the Roark Bless Up breathable stretch shirt right now, and I have yet to wear this thing and not get comments from other people about how good it looks, about how bright it is, and about how great it is. And by the way, my new podcasting bag is the Accomplice Mule 45-liter bag. It's like a travel bag, but it's perfect for all my podcasting gear and my mic stand and all that. I love it. And whenever I travel, which is often, I don't have to do anything. It's ready to go. So if you're looking to step up your gear and apparel game for travel or adventure itself, or just looking good at work but ready to adventure, as listeners of the show, you can get 15% off your first order going to Roark.com and using the code ASP15. That's ROARK.com, promo code ASP15 for 15% off your first purchase. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
When I was there, I met my partner. You meet your partner literally out in the field, butt naked for the first time. And my partner is such an amazing human being, really like a sister to me. And I think one thing you'll see in that, especially in that first episode, is just how close that bond really was. And so I'm meeting her. I don't think I ever prepared for the fact that I was very real about my own mortality going into that show and what all the things that could happen to me. What I wasn't prepared for is the fact that you are also a spectator to someone else going through those things. And so, Rachel had an issue one night where she went into the early stages of hypothermia. And it's by the grace of God that I woke up first and sort of found her and helped to bring her back. But I never really considered that everything that you're experiencing, you're watching somebody else experience, and watching that can be devastating, especially someone that you grow to love and you have this deep bond with. You really see yourselves as like two people going through this challenge, watching her go through that. The fear of, like, after that, I was terrified to go to sleep at night, because it was like, if I go to sleep, well, I wake up and she won't be there. How will I feel if, like, the person that I was doing this challenge with doesn't make it to the end because I did something wrong, or I felt, that was real legitimate fear. And it was also a fear for myself, of dying. I had kids at the time, and I never for once thought, when you're playing with temperatures in the 30s and you're exposed and all you've got is, a small fire, your life is on the line. Every time you close your eyes for bed, your life's on the line. That was real, genuine fear. And mentally, I was not in a place mentally to be able to push through it. I just wasn't, and every day starts as like a small voice in your head, maybe whispering that, like, holy crap, you might want to consider like an exit plan here. How the heck are you getting out of here? And then as the days progress, it becomes a screaming voice in your head that's telling you this is all wrong. Like, why are you doing this? And it's really just that fear. And I wasn't prepared for it. And I think, talking to people, I think a lot of people experience that in their lives. We end up in a place where we're uncomfortable and the mind just starts telling us, like, get out of here, get away, stop doing this. And I think probably the best lesson I learned from that first adventure was that you have to push beyond that voice. Like, the willpower, the human will, is something that looks right in the face of that fear and right in the face of your mortality and says, like, no, like, I'm going to keep pushing forward. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to persevere through this because, hope without willingness is irrationality. Hope plus willingness is one of the most powerful things in the world. And, like, you got to find that willingness and you got to dig deep for it. And you got to push through, like, the things that are like that voice is telling you to give up and let go. You got to push through it. And to me, it's really it coming back. It was like having been to that line and having come up short. It told me that was really where I needed to focus my efforts. And so that was the thing there that was really surprising to me. That was the one thing that sort of I wasn't prepared for when I went in.
What is it like being in that situation with cameras? It's like, it's one thing to just be out there I've been in situations where it's like, you're out there and having to survive and face that mental toughness. But what is it like when there's people documenting the whole thing? Do you just kind of have to tune it out or just act like it's not there? I'm not sure what kind of they want you to do. Like, hey, just pretend they're not there or don't interact. But like, how was that for you? Because that seems like such a just very unique. You know what I mean? Very unique situation to be in.
Yeah, it's a mix, right? So cameras are there and they're there to help tell the story of what's happening, right? Like in the moment, you don't think about what it is that they're seeing, like you're so focused on what's in front of you. Honestly, there were times when it was annoying because there's I'd be, trying to do something strenuous and, you haven't eaten in days. So you're all grumpy and they're like, hey, can you explain what you're doing? And you're like, I am trying to break a tree branch right now because I'm breaking tree branches this morning. Is that good enough?
They're like eating a sandwich. And you're like,
they're not in front of you. They in every way. So here's the thing. The camera people in a lot of ways are part of the adventure. They're almost like they're suffering with you in a lot of ways. Whatever you're exposed to, they're exposed to as well. I mean, they have, they have maybe some modicum of protection, but it's not much nicer for them. They're exposed to insects and they're exposed to the extremes in temperature. They're exposed to the rain. They're walking up and down those same cliffs and they're not looking down because they got a camera. They're not looking for, vipers. It's a trust relationship, And so the camera crew in some ways is part of the adventure with you. One of the guys that was there with me, there was a Naked and Afraid episode out in Botswana where they got charged by a herd of elephants. The camera crew and the survivalists got charged by elephants. And I mean, I asked the camera guy, like, what are you thinking, Dan? And he's like, I'm pointing the camera towards the elephants and wondering if I'm shooting my own death. And I'm just like, it's one thing to like do this as a participant, and I'm going to be in the field for a certain amount of time. It's a whole nother thing to do this year round and go from, you're going to the most inhospitable places. Like, okay, you get to spend a month in the desert. Yay. You get to go spend a month in like a rainforest. Yay. You're not, these guys are, they're wonderful human beings, but that's what it's like when the camera's around. You sometimes they annoy you by making you have to repeat things. But a lot of times, they're sort of your brethren in suffering. They're there with you, and they maintain a positive attitude. Throughout the experience. They're quite remarkable people.
The good news is the cameraman never dies. So as long as you got the camera in hand, you'll be fine. Charging buffalo or grizzly bear or whatever it is, you'll be all right. Dude, that is so crazy. Yeah, that's probably I mean, there's probably so many moments that they go through that you probably could make an argument, man, that should have been on camera because that is epic. I remember asking somebody else that, like, hey, has there been anything that's ever happened where you're like, I wish they would have caught what they just did on camera because that was epic. And they're not, they can't. So the element of being naked, obviously that's a big part of the show because like you realize just how vulnerable the human body is. What part of that becomes the most annoying? I would say for me, because I'm so pale, would be getting just absolutely destroyed by the sun or that threat all the time. Is that an issue? Like the sun is at your feet that are always out there. You're not used to being like just barefoot to that level all the time. Some people are, but not everybody. I'm not. Like what part of that becomes the most annoying or the most threatening thing?
Yeah, great question. Being African-American, man, is awesome because I've never had a sunburn in my life.
It sucks. It absolutely sucks. All right.
No suntan lotion required, no sunburn. So the sun wasn't a factor. In fact, I would say in Argentina, the sun, even for my partner, the sun was very welcome. Now, mind you, we're under the canopy in some ways. So, the sun was more illuminating, but not as direct maybe as it would be in some environments. There's two things I think that are really difficult, in terms of being naked. One, the feet are, it's horrible. I stepped on like a 3-inch thorn. It broke off in my foot.
God.
Barely walked for a day. Just the wear and tear on your feet is absolute torture, they blister. You're not in a place where you can clean any wounds that you get very easily. So, your feet are just taking a beating. And then probably the thing that maybe no one realizes is just like when you go to sleep, we've just by virtue of sleeping in beds for as long as we've trained our bodies to feel like there's very few pressure points that we're exposed to when we're asleep. So when you lay down on the ground, when you lay down on rocky ground or dirt or rocks, every one of those little things, is like sort of, you can feel it. They create these little pressure points. You wake up during the night and you got like 30 little rocks pressed into your skin and you have to scrape them off. The insects you're like a golden corral for insects, man. They're just like, it's got like, what? This guy must be the dumbest creature in the jungle. Like the mosquitoes are just like, there's nothing you can do to prevent, yourself from being eaten alive. And people have asked me coming back, well, why didn't you make clothes? And why didn't you? And it's like, do you realize where you are? Like, they're like, well, you could put leaves down and sleep. And I'm like, yeah. And, have you ever raked leaves before? You know how long a dead leaf lasts? Like, it's dead in like a day. And now I just got a feast for ants, So, it's a lot of it is like, there's ways to mitigate it, but in a lot of ways, you just have to sort of suffer through it. That's really what you realize is that the exposure of being naked just gives you more elements to have to suffer through. And so, you have to just sort of will yourself and not like try not to feel that pain, is the most like, or just not focus on it. But the feet laying down, the casual tree lashes, I fell into the river at one point in Argentina. And there was leeches in it. That wasn't fun. It just ramps up your exposure, to say the least. And then at nighttime when it's cold, I mean, you talk about a whole new element. It's one thing to be outdoors in the 30s. That's cold even when you have a braided sleeping bag and you got a fire and you've got, hats and gloves. That's still semi-comfortable. Being naked is a whole new level in that type of condition. It's a whole new level.
I do a lot of trips in Florida where I'm from in camping trips, and I bring people in a lot of, it's like, you don't need a sleeping bag. And I think that every time, especially this time of year. And just last week, 2 weeks ago, did a trip with like 20 people, and you lay down, it's sweltering hot when you go to sleep like at 9 or 8 or 9, because it's dark. There's nothing to do really when you're camping and it gets dark unless you just want to shine a light for hours. So you just end up going to bed earlier. Man, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, it doesn't matter what time of year it is, you're cold. If you're laying on top of that sleeping bag and you either get inside or you get something to cover up, at least for me and a lot of people I talk to, and I can't imagine in a place that would fluctuate more. And it's only like 80 degrees outside. It's just that exposed skin is so vulnerable to any sort of change in humidity or temperature, especially when it's just sitting still out there, just bombarded by the environment. So I can only imagine a place like that could fluctuate so much more, and you're just out in it. That seems to me like it would be the hardest, dealing with that lack of rest or quality rest. What part of it felt easier than you expected?
Funny enough, the food part of it and the hunger part was a lot easier than I thought.
What do you do about that? What's like for folks not familiar with the show? You don't have anything.
No, you don't have anything. Nobody. People always ask. I bet they throw a power bar out there, like in the woods, and they're like, "Oh, look, you found it. You can eat it." Like, and it's like, no, none of that happens. You're not. No one is. There's no giveaways in that show. So you are looking for things that you can eat in the natural environment. So in Argentina, for example, we found these tubers. They were basically like, it looked kind of like an aloe plant, but underneath it, the roots were like tubers when you pulled them apart. We could boil those and eat them.
And it's up to you to figure this out. Like you could be getting poison for all you know.
Yeah, you got to know what you can and can't eat.
Wow.
So we knew that was edible. There was a nut that grew there, very, very tiny nut. Took a lot of work. We had to sort of dry roast them for a while to to make them edible, but those were edible. And then fishing, was something I did as well. And so I've never done primitive fishing. In fact, I would say just outside of Naked and Afraid, I'm probably, a fairly mediocre fisherman. Probably the best way to describe it. I'm good at it. I'm good at all the setup and the bait types and all that. But in terms of being like someone that if I was going out in the wild and there was someone that could fish better, I would literally give them everything. Here you go, man. But I was able to catch catfish in Argentina, and that supplied, some much needed. We got 2 meals out of it. We got, we basically grilled the fish, which was absolutely delicious.
I can imagine, man.
Boiled all the bones and things that we didn't want to eat and made basically a fish stew, kind of like a light broth, which we ate that night when it was cold. And it was like just all the difference in the world of having a belly full of like hot liquid versus, like just going to bed after drinking some water, So
how'd you catch the fish? What do you do? How'd you figure that out?
So if you can imagine, we were in this place. It was called the Impenetrable Jungle, and there was a bit of a bluff. And at the base of that bluff was this sort of free-flowing river called the Rio Bermejito. It's a freshwater river, very, very muddy, opaque water. I had the feeling that there was going to be catfish in that water, just bottom, like people near that shoreline. There were going to be fish near that shoreline at some level. Sometimes you're just trying to find, like, where am I putting the line out? There was a current to it. So I brought we bring one item. I brought braided fishing line, like a 99-pound braided fishing line. And then I brought these treble hooks. To me, people sometimes bring just a single J hook, and that's the worst to fish. Like a treble hook, essentially, you're using 3 times the bait, but it's a guaranteed snag. Very rarely is anything going to bite down on a treble hook and pull your bait. So I knew that was going to be, to me, a better hook for a survival situation. It also could be useful for making a trap or something like that too.
Yeah, that's true.
Like a mini grappling hook. And so the first thing I did, at first I was like kind of building the pole and like seeing if I could put it out in the water. And I was just like, this is dumb. Like standing out here for hours is dumb. So what I did was actually tie off a line onto a tree. And it was then just trying to get it to the right depth for where the fish were. So I used a stick as like a bobber and got it to the right depth. And then it was finding the right bait. And it turned out, luckily it rained. The rain was like a blessing and a curse. It was freezing cold and all you could do is blow it on a fire for 8 hours. But the other thing it did was it exposed that there was actually grubs underneath the soil. And the fish loved the grubs. They didn't like much else, but grubs they loved. So putting a few grubs on the hook, you started to see it real quick. And sure enough, I got that bite on that line, man. It was, you want to talk about yelling and screaming, like what is Walt Whitman says, release my barbaric yelp. I mean, it was like yelling and screaming. And that's how I caught that fish. It was just a dead line sit. And, he came up and, he was just at the right depth. He bit down and I grabbed that hook. And I'll tell you what, man, that catfish he was out of the water for a good 5 minutes and he was still flopping around.
Wow.
I hit it right at the center of the head with a knife. It still flopped for a good minute. It was a tough SOB, but that was how I caught fish and that's how we ate. It was great.
So were you pretty happy with the item you brought?
I brought my strategy was to bring like 30 things and see like, okay, which one of these things will I bring in the field? So I showed up when I went through Argentina and I was going through customs. I had like a gun case with me. They opened it up and I had like, a machete, 4 knives, a bush sword. I had a blowgun and blow darts, axes. I mean, the lady looked at me like, what the hell are you coming here to do?
What's going on here?
I'm a Spanish speaker though. And funny enough, the show comes on in Argentina. And so she knew about the show. So she was a fan. So we talked for a good 5 minutes about the show. And she was all excited. And she's like, oh, that's a good item to bring. Oh yeah, that's a good item to bring, and so, yeah, it was funny, but yeah, I ended up with the braided fishing line. It was great. We could use it. You could use the braided fishing line for rope because you could just basically re-braid it and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's plenty of it. It held about one strand was over 100 pounds, so it just, there was no fish that was going to break the line really. So you have multiple uses of it. So I thought it was great. I thought it was a really good find. And of course, getting a fish with it made it worth his weight in gold.
And to your partner, do they get to bring something too?
Yeah, they got to bring something. She brought a knife.
Perfect. I was going to say that's like seems to be the most popular item. And so you kind of have all your bases covered there. Dang, great strategy. That makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask, like, what did you end up catching the fish with? But that's genius. That's perfect. What level of resourcefulness or moment, maybe it was that one, that you're most proud of, that you kind of had to think on your feet and create, and you're like, wow, I can't believe I figured that out, or this is a really good solution? Was it the fishing, or was there something else that you kind of maybe didn't have an item that was ready-made?
That's such a great question. So bushcraft and sort of that skill of like being able to build and sort of use the environment for resources was definitely like my strength going into the show. I knew that going into the show. It's been my strength in life, period. The ability to sort of ideate and then create something.
Just in general, not necessarily in a survival setting, but any setting.
Yeah. One of my hobbies outside of all the 50 million other things I told you is I build vintage arcade cabinets, with like 3,000 games inside and 2 players. I built them, for my son. I built them for other people. So I'm very handy.
All right. So I looked you up on Instagram, and all I saw, man, I'm not going to lie, all I saw was like those arcade cabinets and cigars. And I'm like, dang, this guy was on Naked and Afraid. Like, what did he do? And but I didn't know all the other background. So that's awesome. But anyway, I did see that on your Instagram.
Yeah, that's funny. So the shelter, building the shelter was incredibly important. At the time, I thought that was the biggest failure, was that the shelter wasn't keeping us warm at night, but looking back on it, that shelter was amazing. I mean, so to put it, I built this sort of debris hut shelter. By the last few days we were there, that shelter had a mud foundation. So I literally built, a wall of mud. On the inside, it had a brick wall, a mud brick reflective wall for the fire to throw the fire back towards us. It was fully covered, so fully protected from the elements. With an area for the smoke to leave for the fire that was inside. We had a door that was super strong. In fact, it was so strong that like if the med crew showed up, we literally had to like take a few minutes to move it out of the way and let people in. I barked trees to, create additional shingles on the rear of it, so to give it an additional wind block. It was a great shelter. The biggest problem there was just I didn't quite understand how to make a long fire was necessary when you're naked and you're in a shelter like that for survival. For me, coming from Colorado, I'm always prepared in the elements. You're never making a full-length, full-body fire anywhere near you in Colorado because, there's a chance you burn yourself up and everything else.
Yeah, wildfires, all that.
Yeah, so that was a skill that I didn't quite have, and it made a huge difference. And it made me see the shelter as ultimately this sort of fail point, when in actuality it was like having, seen other shelters on the show, like it was very well done. It could rain and we didn't feel anything. It was in every way a home, every way a home.
Did you feel that sense of like refuge like you do with your own home? Like, was that kind of sense there?
Big time. I definitely felt it. I felt that sense of home. I felt that sense of refuge. It was like a fortress by the last part of it. It just was a freezing cold at night fortress. But, if we could have figured that out, yeah. I mean, it was the one place where I knew I could go in there. And if a jaguar came up at nighttime, like it's not getting in. Like you're protected. Snakes couldn't get into it because it had a mud foundation. So they couldn't get in, to the shelter to try and, steal any heat or warm yourselves up. Like I said, in every way, it was a very well done shelter, and it was something we worked on pretty hard. And I felt like it was a real great source of refuge. Needed some more knowledge and skills. If I had it to do over again, I could have like made beds and like got us off the ground and got a nice long fire in between. And like, I always look back on it like this is what I learned and what I would do differently in that same situation.
How is your dynamic with your partner? Because I'm excited. I know it was just premiered, but that's a big part of this too. It's not just, I mean, dude, this is just still such a crazy just format of a show. I mean, we all know how insane it is, but just the element of, that's a huge part of it, that not everyone, you can't necessarily always prepare for kind of the soft skills of like emotional and relational intelligence, but that's a big part of your success or failure. Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode.
So Rachel was my partner in Argentina. To put that relationship into context, there's a bond between us that like just develops like when people are in a situation like that I don't think anyone really like, unless you've been in it, I don't know that you understand. I think it's similar to the way to my dad. My dad describes his war buddies. A few years back, we took this camping trip and my dad went to Kansas to see someone that, was really one of his few surviving friends from the war. My dad was a swift boat veteran. And I remember as soon as they saw each other, it was like, you saw sort of this brotherhood, this sort of thing like that I've not seen with my dad in other situations. And with Rachel, it's the only time I've ever seen anything like that. I would say she's like a sister to me. She's also she also understands me at a level which, like maybe other people don't, even some of my best friends, because as men, we're sort of taught to subdue our emotions of fear or our emotions of inadequacy. Not that those things are not still there, but we learn very, very at a very young age how to disguise them, how to not show them. Mm-hmm. Rachel is maybe a person that has seen every single one of those emotions and every single one of those aspects. Has had to I left her there, broke a promise and left her in Argentina. And, I've carried that around like a 20-ton weight on my back, feeling that pain from breaking my word to her. So her forgiveness has been, something that's taught me a lot in life. I can't say enough great things about her. She's in a lot of ways an inspiration to me. And in a lot of ways, just an amazing friend. I feel like there's family that you're born with and, and then there's the family that you find. And I can't help but just feel very blessed that I've found this person. And like, we've managed to be sister and brother and like have that type of relationship. And in a world that like kind of pushes you towards superficial ends, none of that's ever been a product of our relationship. Like the whole reality TV thing has never been like, it's a legitimate friendship. It's a legitimate bond. Like the other stuff is really superficial and outside of it. That story is unique and it's something that like I think I will treasure for the rest of my life.
I feel incredibly bonded with people that I haven't gone through nearly that much with. So I can imagine that this kind of setting and environment and exposure just irreversibly connects you in ways that you just can't relate to unless you've gone through probably, like you said, like war or something of that extreme where it's just we're connected. I can't relate, I don't think, in that way. So that's it. That's amazing. Maybe my wife and I need to go spend 21 days on a beach naked and afraid. We more or less do that at home, but
it wasn't without some arguments and there was some bickering, and all that kind of stuff, but
to be expected.
Yeah, you get down to that essence of, like we went through it, man. Like, we went through it.
As we wrap up, when you were out there, what did you miss the most about being home? And then once you got home and kind of settled back into normal life, what did you miss the most about being out there?
Oh, man, that is a fantastic question. When I was there, the food was like, we talked about food all the time. Like anything, chicken wing, some salty French fries, all that.
So before I've been on adventures before thinking about food and I would start crying. But just from hunger, I'd like my mom's key lime pie or like you said, some chicken wings. And I'd literally I'd start crying, like thinking I cannot wait for that moment. I can't imagine this setting though, man. This is crazy. So anyway, food.
Food, yes, food all the time. And then, it's funny, the outside world recedes to the very edges of your mind. The things that you stressed out about, just in the outside world are just gone. Like there's you just don't have time to think about money or like work or bills or any of it. There's none of that there. It's all gone. And you find yourself missing, if there's anything you miss, you find that like the sort of routine of the day, it's something that like when that's gone, the day now has its own sort of freeform rhythm that's unique. That was something that I missed when I was there. And so, for me, it was like when I got like, as soon as I could sort of like find a new schedule or a new routine to sort of push through the day, really was helpful. It felt like that came back. Coming back, there was a lot of things, honestly, that I missed, that I didn't expect to miss. I think coming back, I realized there were things in life that made me deeply unhappy. This like idea that like material comforts and these things are like necessary to be happy. Like I experienced every one of those emotions: happiness, sadness, excitement, like enjoyment. I experienced all of those things out in the jungle with nothing, so coming back and realizing like where my life was at, sort of how what the state of my relationships was. Like I got divorced shortly after coming back from Naked and Afraid, which is sort of a cliche, actually. Like that has actually happens quite a bit. But coming back, I think, I realized that I really wasn't the best person I could be. There were moments in Argentina when I felt so uniquely alive. And so I found like a part of myself, like, cause there was, I didn't have access to the coping mechanisms that I had when I was back home. And, so coming back and like sort of, finding all those things again and not really finding the same level of happiness and not finding that same level of like sort of self-enjoyment, I've missed it. And I think I can remember like picking up the phone and calling Rachel a couple of times and just being like, why am I feeling this way? Like what's going on with me? And it just turned out that there were, life was not done handing me changes. Like the discomfort I felt in Argentina was going to continue, and it was going to continue until I found some traction and grew into the person that I wanted to be. I was on a transition point in life. And once I started that journey, it wasn't going to end when I wanted it to. It was going to end when it came to its conclusion. And so I missed that sense of being in a place where there was nothing else to worry about, and there was, besides just your survival and just the very basic things that like it was weird, right? Because you can technically do that anytime you want, right? You can go strip off all your clothes and go live in the woods naked and forage for food and like, see what happens.
You have to probably do that somewhere near Boulder, though.
Yeah.
Somewhere it's a little more accepted.
I found myself missing it. And it became a part of a longer transition, to the person ultimately that I'm working to be. And so, that was really where that journey started. And there was points where I missed it because, in that environment, it just clarified things so much for me.
That makes a lot of sense. And that's something we hear from a lot of adventurers, is just missing the simplicity of life. Life gets so complicated when you get back. There's meetings and, all that survival stuff is fine. You have clothes, you have food, you have shelter, but it's all the extras that just start to just take over. When you get back to quote normal life. You kind of answered this last question in a way, but I want to ask it and see if there was anything else. What did you learn, or what change do you hope lasts in you? We make a lot of commitments coming back from something like this. What do you want to stick with you through this experience for just moving forward? Are you going to continue to try to introduce new perspectives and new experiences? Are you going to, go spend a week naked every once in a while out in the woods? Like what do you want to stay with Naeem forever?
My biggest takeaway from this experience is, When I was back in high school, we had to write this life philosophy paper, and I was such a jackass kid in high school, man. I think I took like a diagram of like a cow, it had like the rump rose shank and I put like the world religions on it, and I turned it in. I was like, this is my life philosophy. So of course I failed the paper, and like, it's only now that I start to see like the genius of that assignment. It just boils down to just 3 words for me, which is never give up. In the face of hopelessness, like no matter what, just never give up. Like if you're cold and hungry and tired, never give up. If you're, if you're on your back and looking at every problem in life is stacked up on you, just never give up. There is something about hope and finding the willingness to just move forward in life that is so powerful. What that adventure gave me was like, hey, it's a failure that millions of I don't know about you. I failed and millions of people got to watch it, right? Like millions of people.
And but you were naked.
And I was
on top of that.
Everything else. But it's just one step in the journey. It's not the end. It's just one step. We always look at sometimes we see people fail and we're like, oh my God, he failed, as if like that's the permanent state that person will be in for the rest of their lives. And it's like, no, like it's not the getting knocked down part that's the hardest. It's the really getting back up and taking more of the blows. It's the hardest part. And the biggest takeaway I got from that is there's so much more willingness in you than there's so much more strength in you than if you just can keep moving forward, despite what life throws at you, just never give up. You'll get there. You'll make it. You'll find the things in life that you want to achieve are much closer to you than you think. And so, that's sort of my biggest learning from that is there are real fears that we carry in life. There's situations that bring those fears to the surface. It's how you push past those things. And it's that sort of willingness to be uncomfortable and just stay with it. That's my big takeaway. And I don't think I'll ever lose it in life. I don't think anyone that knows me will allow me to go back to that point. And I can tell you this, my moments since the show have not been without some real hard struggles. If there's one thing that I took from it that has been, the lesson or to push through all those times, has been just don't give up and keep moving forward, man. Don't give up. Don't let your willingness guide you. You got more of it than you ever know. And it's worth every scrape and scrap and, naked, embarrassing moment I have in the time that I've done it.
Well, Naeem, this has been a really cool conversation. I had high hopes. This is even better than I thought. You're a great storyteller, and I could ask a million other things, honestly, but this is, I want people to watch the show. I want people to see this. Anytime there is an interview where there's like a visual element to it, that they can go check something out, whether it's a documentary or like this, a show, I really encourage folks to go do that, to really put into perspective everything we're talking about. So thank you so much for being on the show and just basically being exposed a little bit more, telling us about the experience. You're just keeping this streak of being naked and open going. This is awesome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk. I think a lot of us, despite the fact that, we're not out in the jungle on television, we're in some part of our lives where we're exposed, and a lot of us are afraid, and I like to think that there's some commonality in that story. So thank you for letting me tell it.
Oh man, we're all naked and afraid. We really are. First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to grow in the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.